Hey guys, finished it here. Something different for today's video. We're actually going to be taking a road trip to Melbourne, Australia. We basically haven't visited it for quite a long time, including a number of cancelled trips. Now we're mostly there to spend time with friends and family, but of course I'm going to squeeze in some time to check out some gaming stores to try and find some retro titles still on my list. Last time I was in Melbourne was more than 2 years ago, so I'm keen to see what's changed. Hopefully we can find some pretty decent stores. So let's take a look. Now, if you're driving to Melbourne for the first time, you might find it fun, but it takes around 8 hours or so from the ACT, and the Hume Highway ain't the most interesting of roads. But hey, eventually you find your way there. Arriving in Melbourne, the weather was surprisingly good for once. Melbourne is known for being prone to rain and even multiple seasons in a single day. The hustle and bustle of the city is pretty manageable because of a fairly good public transport network. It makes it pretty easy to get around. But still, having a car is handy. This being a short trip, the plan for the day is to aim for a retro store called the Games Experts, followed by a second-hand store which is rumoured to potentially have retro stuff, and then, if there's any time left, to check out the best chain outlet for EB games at Melbourne Central. And so, ducking out of the rain, I arrived at High Street Reservoir to check out our first stop, the Game Experts. So first entering the store, I see this cabinet of really cool handhelds, including some really old Nintendo Game Watches down the bottom. And me being a Sega guy, of course I had to go straight for their Master System wall to see if they've got any on my want list. Right next to the Master System wall, they've got a towering wall of original NES games, including some loose Mega Drive stuff and Atari. And right next to that, they've got a newer wall of Sega stuff, Mega CD, Dreamcast, Sega Saturn. Oh man, this stuff's getting expensive. And of course there is some Mega Drive stuff, wedged in between some GameCube and Xbox games. If there's one thing I know about these gaming stores, it's usually that all the good stuff is behind the glass. So check out all this. I've got an original Neo Geo Pocket Color, which includes Sonic the Hedgehog, some Mega CD titles including the Terminator, and some harder to acquire stuff. Awesome. And now if you're a Nintendo fan, the front counter is the place to go. Chock-a-block with Super Nintendo and N64, some Game Boy stuff. Price-wise, pretty much what you'd expect to pay these days. Of course, you have to factor in not having to pay for shipping, so alright overall. But of course, the boxed Nintendo stuff is going to set you back a little bit more, seeing as it's so sought after these days. Overall, what I loved about this store, other than the owners being super helpful, was they've actually got a warehouse full of extra stock that they don't have in shop. So if there's something specific that you're after, you can always just ask and they'll check their inventory and ship it out to you. Next up, a short 15-minute drive over to Round Again, sort of second-hand vintage music and gaming store. Entering the store, you see this small corner of Xbox, PS2 and some PS3 games. I'm not really actively collecting for these, so I was thinking at this point that maybe it wasn't worth the drive. But then, as I walk around the store, they appear to be a lot more about vintage hi-fi and vinyl records, which I'm totally fine with. I've actually got a vinyl collection as well, but I'm not actively collecting anything at the moment. I pretty much have everything I want, and I've spent way too much money on it. But still, I was super impressed by the amount of stuff they have here. So yeah, if you are into vintage hi-fi or vinyl records, then definitely check this store out. It's worth the trek, and you'll definitely find what you're after. Now I did say this place appeared to be more of a hi-fi store because eventually I find this room at the back. Turns out this place does have an epic collection. I'm talking PS4, Xbox One, wall full of accessories. There's some PS1 and PSP, including the consoles. There's boxes on the floor with assorted games. End up digging through a bunch of those. You've got original NES, boxed and loose. There's N64, SNES, boxed and loose as well. And then it just keeps going. There's Atari. And of course, I was keeping an eye out for the Sega stuff. Bunch of Master System games, Mega Drive, and even 32X actually. And some Game Gear stuff also. But the best thing about going to this place was the prices. I'm talking $20 for Super Nintendo games. $30-40 for loose N64 stuff, and some box stuff going for around about 100, and Sega stuff starting at about 35. And so I guess because this isn't a gaming store on its own, it does have some bargains available. But that was pretty much it. The end of the Melbourne trip. We didn't end up visiting EB Games in the end. We'll have to save that for next time, as we had 8 hours of the Hume to look forward to. But of course, we've got to check out what I ended up picking up. And I actually got a few games. Super Street Fighter 4 on the PlayStation 3. One of the all-time classics. And I'm not really collecting for the PlayStation 3, but I just saw it in store and I hadn't actually played it. So I thought, why not? It's pretty cheap. So yeah, pick that one up. Next up, one of my actual collecting goals is to get all of the physical Sonic the Hedgehog games. So this is All Stars Racing Transformed on the Wii U. It actually looks pretty awesome from the trailer. Haven't played it yet, but looking forward to it. Thirdly, an actual retro title, which is what I went looking for in the first place. Super Mario World on the Super Famicom/SNES. I've actually got the Japanese console, so I saw this for pretty cheap and thought, hey, that doesn't need a translation to play, so I picked that one up. Next up, another PlayStation 3 game. Man, I just couldn't resist these bargain prices. Final Fantasy 13. Haven't actually played any of this series, believe it or not, but I'm slowly collecting them, and one day I'll go through it. Stay tuned for that. Lastly, I couldn't leave without picking up a Sega title, and I do love my beat-em-ups, so I ended up picking up Renegade, which is actually on my want list. You may have heard of a little game called Double Dragon. This is a precursor to that. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to finishing this at some point in the near future. But yeah, that's pretty much everything, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.